Hi, I'm Paul Grand, CEO of MedTechInnovator. For those of you who don't know, MedTechInnovator is an accelerator for medical technology, specifically in the device space, device diagnostics, digital health. We work with tons and tons of innovators from all around the world to make their technologies as successful as possible. And I'm really lucky that we get a chance to interact with some really fantastic companies, large and small. And today, you've got a great panel who I'm going to introduce of people who represent some of those companies, as well as other aspects of the industry. I think you're going to really enjoy their opinions and get into some discussion. We're going to do these things rapidly, as the panel says. But first, let me let them introduce themselves. Do you guys have, you do have microphones, right? Yeah, cool. So why don't we start over here with Chelsea Gregg. So Chelsea's with Edwards. You want to tell us about yourself, Chelsea? I think it's probably just
already on. Okay.
There we go, yes.
So, hello everyone. I'm Chelsea Gregg. I'm from Edwards Lifesciences. I'm part of the exploration team, which sits in the advanced technology business of Edwards, and we're solely focused on the outside world, outside of Edwards Lifesciences. So I spend my days working with many small companies, startups, innovators across the world to see what's out there in future innovation for structural heart disease.
Fantastic. And then Monica Jain, too.
Hi there, I'm Monica Jain. You might remember me from a couple hours ago.
Yes.
I'm a general and endocrine surgeon, assistant professor of surgery and surgical innovation officer at Cedars-Sinai, as well as a partner at Wavemaker 360 Health. That's a little bit about me.
Fantastic. Joe Smith.
Hi, Joe Smith. No, that's not part of the CIA Witness Relocation Program, as I was asked when I registered this morning. I'm the chief scientific officer for Becton Dickinson. BD is probably one of the best kept secrets in medtech, but we're 75,000 people, shipped 45 billion products last year, and touch about 90% of hospitalized patients. My job is much like Chelsea's in terms of focusing externally and what else could BD be doing to kind of move the needle. Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. And Jason Halac from Dexcom.
Hello, everyone. Jason Halac, co-founder and senior director for Dexcom Ventures, a wholly contained CVC within Dexcom. We broadly invest in equity investments in early-stage startup companies that are strategic to Dexcom as the parent to expand the reach of continuous sensing into other chronic diseases.
Excellent. Very good. So usually I'm asking these people for their opinions about startups, but today we're going to be talking specifically kind of about trends and things happening in the industry, and we're going to do this in a rapid-fire way using these innovative panels, these little paddles you see over here, thumbs up and thumbs down. So I'm going to ask them a series of questions. They're instantly going to raise them with their thumbs up or thumbs down, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of these topics as we go. So I'm just going to start off, since this is a device conference, I thought it'd be appropriate to start off and just say, are devices better for patients than drugs? What do you guys think? Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, okay, well, I'm going to start off with a thumbs down. And you work for a device company.
I know.
What? Come on. I mean, that's pretty controversial.
I love devices.
Yeah.
But I mean, the real answer is it depends, right?
It depends.
But the reason kind of my gut said thumbs down is just I work with a lot of, chronic structural heart patients, and I think there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of amazing drug therapies that are coming out, and you can titrate up, titrate down, add drugs, take away drugs. And I was doing it from more of, if you have an implantable medical device, that's kind of a final decision point. Like, you can't undo that. You can't take that away. So I think that's always then something you have to be cautious about with your patient population.
All right, very good answer. By the way, these opinions are their own opinions and do not represent their companies. All right, let's go. Let's keep going. Any of you want to comment anything else before I move on to the next question? Next question. Do we think that devices will overwhelmingly replace drugs as frontline therapy in cardiology in the next 5 years? We got a dissenter. I'm going to go with you then, Joe, on the dissenter. You think it will?
Yeah. I think to to, again, borrow from Chelsea, it may depend, but it depends a bit on what we consider devices. I think the notion of a great big piece of titanium connected to some long lead is a familiar view of devices, or something that replaces a heart valve is a familiar view. But as one thinks about changing the scale and getting into smaller and smaller devices, you can start to emulate all the effects of drugs without having to worry so much about off-axis effects.
All right, I like it. I like it. I'm a device guy, so I'm there. Okay, so I know we have to talk about ChatGPT because nobody else is doing that today. So I figured we have to bring this in because it's topical, right? And you guys should know about this. Have you heard of ChatGPT? Just kidding. All right, so a couple questions related to AI and ChatGPT. So let's start off in general with ChatGPT. First question, have you used it? No? Okay. Did you like it? All right. And are you afraid of it? Okay, a couple, 50-50. I think I'm right in the middle there. So by the way, I asked ChatGPT the question about will devices replace drugs in the next 5 years, and it said drugs and devices have different mechanisms of action that can often be used in combination to provide optimal treatments, and while devices such as implantable cardioverter defibrillators and cardiosynchronization therapy, CRT, can be effective in treating certain heart conditions such as heart failure and arrhythmias, drugs remain essential for managing many other cardiovascular diseases such as hypertension, coronary artery disease, and hyperlipidemia. So there you go. I don't know, do you agree with ChatGPT? Anybody? You guys agree with ChatGPT on that? All right, okay. I should have just had ChatGPT on this panel. This would be fantastic. Or at least, maybe I do. Okay, so let's keep going over here. So a little more on AI. So in the next 5 years, do you think that AI will become the first line of contact for patients before speaking to a doctor in the next 5 years? All right, one dissenter over there. We're going to come back to that in a second, Monica. Do you think AI will be the first line of contact for, did I say for patients or did I say for doctors first? Patients, okay. What about for doctors? You think the doctors, it'll be their first line in the next 5 years? AI in general. All right, okay. And then the third question here, will doctors who use AI replace doctors who don't? All right, okay. All right, look at that. Oh, this is good. Okay, so I'm just going to ask one, so let's just get one person to comment kind of on this general theme over here about AI being the first line of contact. Anybody want to comment on that? Yes,
Yeah, I can
Monica.
comment. So I think for patients, there is some level of Googling, and WebMD and ChatGPT is just the next level of that. But I think there are a lot of patients who still have significant trust in the healthcare system and in doctors specifically. And so I think there still is a significant portion of patients who are going to go to doctors, and especially for those who need some more interventions, some drugs prescribed, things like that. So for patients, I don't think so. For doctors, we were just having a conversation about this, that AI is really helping augment the way that we practice medicine. And so I'm not talking about, like diagnosis or treatment or anything like that, but even just using AI to analyze the massive amounts of data that we have in medicine. I think that that's going to make a big difference. And that's why I think that doctors who use AI and use AI to analyze the massive amounts of data that we have to encounter, or that we have in general now, especially with all these devices and things like that, that will augment the decision-making capabilities of the physicians versus doctors who don't utilize those capabilities and that data and those devices.
And so doctors who don't will be replaced by doctors who do. All right, so good segue from that, though. If we took all of the data in our electronic medical records and we fed it into AI, is that going to improve our care? Is that all thumbs down? Is there a thumbs up anywhere? Oh, one thumbs up from Jason at the end. All right, Jason, you start.
Yeah, just think on that data side, the idea of data and kind of bringing awareness to information that you can't in 15 minutes with your doctor explain, putting that kind of longitudinal data together and giving more context for the symptoms somebody is having, I think is going to improve care.
Let's take a dissenter. You want to go, Joe?
So the issue that I would have with it is not so much that the logic engine of AI can do a better job pulling stuff out. It's that if you start with the medical record as your data source, you're looking at a very confounded representation of reality. And so I would choose not to give it all of the things in the EHR if I was interested in improving patient outcome.
Confounded. That's a really nice way of saying garbage in, garbage out. Is that what you're saying, basically?
That was said earlier by my colleague.
All right. So let's move on over here. Let's talk about robots. Let's talk about robots in care. In autonomous robots in particular, so not just robots, because we're all using robots already in some way. Autonomous robots, in the next 5 years, will robots replace doctors or surgeons? And autonomous robots replace doctors or surgeons? All right, okay. Will autonomous robots replace surgical technicians? Any surgical technicians in the room? Okay, just checking. Ooh, look at that, 3 out of 4, okay. We have a couple in our portfolio, Moon Surgical, that will like that answer. Will robots replace nurses? Right, no, come on, they can't replace nurses. Will robots replace pharmacists? Okay. Last one in the series. Will robots replace home caregivers? All right. Very definitive over there. That's good. I like that. All right. Well, let's just talk about this for 1 minute over here. You did mention surgical technicians. So, there was some support for that one, or at least I should say that was what there were some thumbs up. So somebody who gave us a thumbs up on that, what are your thoughts on replacing surgical technicians with robots? Anyone?
Well, I am a surgeon, so I do rely a lot on my surgical technicians, but I think part of it has to do with the transition to more and more minimally invasive and robotic surgery. And so there's less of a need overall for surgical technicians as a whole because you have all the instruments that you need in the patient at any given time. So I think that's one move that helps autonomous robots replace surgical technicians. Even in open surgery, though, I think that there is a possibility that we could have robots that are fast enough to deal with how impatient surgeons are. I think it's possible. I don't know how much in the future, but it is possible.
Okay. I want to talk about data because, again, I don't think anybody's talked about data today. So let's talk about data, continuous data in particular, and I'm gonna give a loaded question here. But in the case of monitoring diabetes and glucose in general, do we think that Apple or anyone will perfect non-invasive glucose monitoring in the next 3 years? Non-invasive glucose monitoring. 2 no's, and are those thumbs up? I can't tell. No, no one thinks they're going to be. I have a bunch of startups that could be very upset about that. How many of you are starting a non-invasive glucose company? Anybody in the room? There are a lot of them, and so far none of them seem to work. As the panel is representing here, how about consumerization of care? And we're going to continue talking about data in a minute, but consumerization of care, will the dominant players in consumer care in 5 years be established consumer companies, like the big tech companies, or the Best Buys of the world, or will they be the big healthcare companies that some of you work for? What do you think? Is it going to be consumer? Let's start with that. Will consumers be the dominant player? All right, all right. Will the big, I guess the opposite is then the same question, right? Will the big healthcare companies be the dominant player in the future? Okay, so, and I think I set 5 years on that, right, as a clock, but my question then for you, Chelsea, why do you think that?
Why did I pick big
Yes.
tech over?
Why did you pick big tech over your employer? No, I'm sorry. I'm saying over the, no, please tell me, why do you think big tech?
I guess my viewpoint on this is that, and what I've seen, I've worked for a couple of big companies, and big tech, Google, Apple, name your favorite. they're so good at working with data. They're so good at data science, and they've been doing it for so very, very long. I think there's a lot of promise for a lot of the small startups, and so maybe that's how it goes into healthcare, but then maybe they just get bought by Google and Apple, so to be their avenue in. So I just think that those companies have such so far ahead in terms of working with big data that I don't see some of like the traditional medical device companies, at least the large ones, being able to overcome them.
Will the big med tech companies acquire, this is a company they do not know this question. Will the big med tech companies be the ones to acquire the big tech companies, or will the big tech companies acquire the big med tech companies? So let's say, let's go with the first one. Will the big tech be the ones to acquire the big med tech? And I guess I don't have to ask the other question. That's good. That was easy. Okay, so anyone want to comment on that as to why you think that will be? Do they just have more money? Like, what do you see? Are they more nimble? What are we talking about here?
I think that just, med tech is really good at regulated structures and dealing with the pain points of the healthcare system and having those connections. And consumer tech is kind of been unburdened. So I think it's easier as a transition for consumer tech to buy med tech to acquire the kind of sort of skill set.
Yeah. Okay.
And they don't like that, burden. That's why.
No, they don't like that burden. No, they don't. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, the mantra of big tech, the Googles, the Amazons, is go fast and break things, right? And that's great if you're
Not
getting
regulated.
You're not regulated.
Right. Okay. So let's talk a little more about consumers. Do you think consumers in the next 5 years will pay more or less out of their pockets for healthcare? Do you think they'll pay more for healthcare in the next 5 years? Huh, that's optimistic. Okay, I like that. That's good. Any consumer startups in the room? Any consumer healthcare startups or people? Okay, well, maybe you should start one. All right, then, what about continuous data? So we talked a little bit about this. In the next 5 years, number one, will doctors, as their standard of care and practice, will they use continuous data in their practice? Universal, okay. Will patients want continuous data? Will they want their healthcare data continuously monitored? They will. Everybody thinks they will, okay. Will payers pay for it? All right, okay. And lastly, will lawyers sue over it? Okay. Yeah, I think we can expect that for sure. If they're not already, I'm sure they will. I mean, I have friends who are doctors who tell me all the time patients come in literally like reams of data, and they're like, what do I, look at this, doc. And the doctor's like, what do you mean? What am I supposed to do with this? Anyone here want to comment on that who's in the medical practice, Monica? Sorry. Yes? Actively, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so I think that continuous data definitely, as I mentioned before, amplifies our ability to take care of our patients, which is why I think both physicians and patients want it. But then it's also a lot more insight and a lot more data that's difficult for people to evaluate. And so if you miss one thing in that continuous data, like one arrhythmia in 6 months of continuous EKG monitoring that then was a, I guess, foreshadowing of a heart attack or something like that, then you could easily be sued over that because you have all of this recorded data. So I think there needs to be a lot of regulation in place about that. But I mean, patients in general are highly litigious. There's a reason that malpractice insurance is so expensive for physicians. And so I don't think that there's ever going to be an advancement that patients also will not end up being able to utilize to sue physicians over, unfortunately.
And I'll just add more from the continuous data device side. We've seen that continuous data is one of the biggest behavioral change engines to the patient themselves. And so I think that, the push from the patient to incorporate that, as well as the benefits for lifestyle changes based on data, is going to be beneficial overall for the system.
Yeah, Joe, did you want to comment? Yeah.
And it will be that persistent acceleration of availability of continuous data, which will drive AI into healthcare, because clinicians won't have the bandwidth to absorb it and will need some engine to examine it and distill the insights. And so as we try to do more and more, we've already overwhelmed the bandwidth of hospitals and doctors, and this will only do some more. And so it will accelerate the adoption of AI and ML approaches.
Yeah. By the way, I'm going to give a commercial for Dexcom. I started using a Dexcom G6 last year to monitor my blood sugar, and I completely altered, as my team will tell you, I totally altered my behavior. I was walking constantly because I was like, oh, my blood sugar's a little high, I should take a walk. I did all that. I was fantastic for like 2 months. I was amazing. And then JP Morgan came up in January, and I was like, I'm going to eat all these meals. I don't want to be on the clock. So I literally stopped wearing it, and I haven't put it back on. And it's terrible because I was so much healthier. I literally think I've gained 10 pounds since taking off my Dexcom. So I'm going to put it back on. You just inspired me. Just sitting here, Jason, you inspired me. So continuous data is amazing, and I'm a huge believer in it. Let's talk a little bit about advances in technology in general. Will advances in technology further the divide in health equity or narrow the divide? Will it further the divide in health equity? Advances in technology. Will it narrow the divide or further the divide? Let's go with narrow the divide. Is it going to narrow the divide? Advances in technology and health equity. 50-50 answer. Anybody want to comment on that? Because health equity is such a huge issue. So all this technology is not going to solve the problem. Joe, come on.
Yeah, so I think my answer is initially it makes it worse, and then eventually it makes it better, right? Like there's just an awful lot of technology that initially it goes to the worried wealthy well, and then it makes the turn and gets disseminated and democratized. And I think this will be an example of that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about cancer detection. Cancer detection has to be good, right? So will improvements in early cancer detection, such as liquid biopsy, better imaging, will that reduce the number of surgeries or increase the number of surgeries that we see in the future? Let's go with, will it increase the number of surgeries that we see in the future? Improvements in cancer detection. There's going to be more surgery. Is that a good thing for patients? Is that a good thing for patients? That's also an answer. Is that a thumbs up, thumbs down? Good for patients, bad for patients? Ooh, that says the surgeon. All right, you don't even need to comment on that. I think we know what's going on. All right, let's keep going over here. How about organ transplant? We heard about organ transplant in the last panel. Will advances in devices and cellular therapies replace organ donors in the next 10 years?
Depends on the organ.
Depends on the organ, okay. I'll allow that. So in any particular organ, let's say, and I'm going to ask you what organ that is. So do we think, for any, should I pick an organ? The kidney. The kidney, yeah, okay. How about the heart? Advanced devices in transplant? No? What kind of surgeon are you again, Monica? What do you specialize in?
I'm an endocrine surgeon.
Endocrine surgeon, okay. All right. Well, let's go with this. So, again, I want to get at kind of just very quickly thinking about like the future of all of these technologies we have, again, to monitor patients now that are coming online in the home. We have so many technologies, all these great new things to do, remote patient monitoring. Again, is this going to increase hospital visits or decrease hospital visits in the future, all this home monitoring? Or is it going to increase hospital visits in the future? That's the question. Oh, that's good. Okay, so it's going to keep us healthy. That's what everyone thinks? Yeah, anyone want to comment? We think all the home monitoring is going to decrease visits. All right, great. I thought it was going to be like the early detection thing, increase surgeries. But okay, that's good. How about this? We're a device conference. Let's talk about drugs again for a second. And in particular, PBMs. Anybody know what PBMs are? Pharmaceutical benefit managers. PBMs, are they good for consumers or bad for consumers? Good for consumers? PBMs are not good. Anybody work for PBM here in the audience today? Anybody? Okay. All right. I asked ChatGPT, are PBMs good for consumers? And ChatGPT said PBMs have been accused of engaging in practices that drive up drug costs, such as steering patients towards more expensive drugs or limiting access to certain medications. They've been criticized for lack of transparency, making it difficult for consumers to understand how much they're paying for their drugs or why certain drugs are not covered. Do we agree with ChatGPT on that? Yes, okay, good. Thank you, ChatGPT. All right, data, again, data. Is the patient the ultimate owner of their data? Sure? Is that my enthusiastic sure? All right. Any comments, Jason, on that?
I was going to say they'll own it, but I think access and processing of that data is going to get monetized or is being monetized. And so they may own it, but it's going to be used in ways that they may not be super excited about.
Is there a way for patients to self-monetize their health data that's on the horizon, let's say in the next 5 years? Do you think patients will somehow be able to say, hey, buy my data? I have some special disease, or I have something that maybe makes my data special. Is there any way in the next 5, 10 years, is there any way for patients to monetize their own data? Any startups here working on that? Nobody. Okay, good. That's good. Don't work on that, apparently. You're not going to get funded if you do. Okay, so let's get to a couple other things here. Training of surgeons. I want to talk about virtual reality. Do we think VR is better for training, let's just say, not just surgeons, but medical procedures in general? Is VR better than standard mechanisms for training our care professionals? Is VR better? Good. Anyone in the VR business? Anyone? Okay. No one's in the business here. It's amazing. Okay, we got one. Good. See? Bodes well. That's good. And I'm going to add a question to this. Will VR democratize the training of clinicians, let's say globally, not just here in the US, but will VR really help to democratize? Good for the VR company. Okay, keep a note of that. All right. Will legal liabilities, you talked about this a little bit, Monica, but I want to dig in a little more, which is, will legal liabilities prevent intraoperative recordings and data from becoming standard of care? Mainly no's on that. It's not going to stop it. This is a train that's left the barn for most of you, except for Monica. What do you think? You think it's going to stop?
So I think that there's going to be a lot of lobbying from physicians, namely surgeons and proceduralists, that we should not allow intraoperative data to be used for medical liability. And the main reason for that is that we use a lot of intraoperative data to train. We do a lot of coaching. We have residents who are training. There's a lot of things that happen in the OR that could, again, be misconstrued as a cause for an error to occur in the operating room. And so I think that physicians are going to be able to maintain that stronghold and say that you cannot use that intraoperative data.
Okay. All right. Joe, you look like you wanted to say something. You were thinking. Just
with great respect, I may disagree slightly. So I think it's going to be preciously difficult to fight transparency. I think that is viewed as such an obvious good that if there's information available, the plaintiff's bar will make a great case for sharing it. How it's interpreted and how it's used will be the rule, the job of the defense attorney and the clinicians to make sure that it's interpreted correctly. But I don't think, at this point, I don't think there's any way to put Pandora back in the box.
okay. It's funny because I think about this all the time in terms of data. We have a company that was in our portfolio that J&J acquired called CSATs that was taking all the data from laparoscopic procedures and letting the crowd evaluate it, not trained surgeons, but letting anybody, like literally anybody anywhere, evaluate it with like 10 minutes of training. But they did a better job. The crowd did a better job than the surgeons at evaluating these procedures. So it seems like eventually, like, we have to let data, at all this, I think, in a big way. So let me keep us on track because I'm going to go off on my own tangent, which I don't want to do. I'm going to try and wrap up here with a couple of questions. So I asked ChatGPT, if I had an amazing panel of healthcare experts here, and you could only ask them one question, what question would you ask them? And this is what it said. What do you believe will be the most significant challenge facing the healthcare industry in the next decade, and how do you think it can be addressed? Anybody want to take a shot at that? What's the most significant challenge?
No,
You don't want to answer.
stab at that. No.
You don't want to take a stab. Anybody want to answer that question? Significant challenge in the next decade. Jason.
I'm going to go with controlling costs. The percentage of income that and kind of what we're paying in the United States, especially for our healthcare, is I think is out of whack in scale. And so I think figuring out to be more efficient, and hopefully with technology that can solve some of these efficiency problems. Yeah.
Yeah,
Joe?
I'll chime in a little bit differently. I do think it's sustainability. I think we've witnessed, what we're calling clinician burnout, a flight from the challenges of the day-to-day work of healthcare. We do spend 19% of GDP, which is, multiples of what the average OECD country gets. We get what I think we all have to agree is a mediocre product. We're 46th in longevity, we're 33rd in infant mortality. It ought to be an embarrassment. And our population is aging. By 2045, I think, for the first time, the number of old people will exceed the number of really young people. And so we're losing a workforce. We're driving more and more people into that age when they need more health care, and we're spending way too much money to deliver a mediocre product. And so the challenge is in redesigning our healthcare system, hopefully with technologies that, as many of you are working on, will make the process more efficient and more seamless. But we've got a big challenge in front of us.
Okay, I'm going to ask two last questions here. First question is, anybody here in the clinical trial world, anybody here conduct clinical trials in any way? One or two people. Okay, you may not want to listen. No, I'm just kidding. Do you think all this great omics data and tests and all the things that we have coming are going to, all the wearables and real-world evidence and all these things, will that eliminate the need to do human clinical trials in any specialty in the next 10 years? Will all this data eliminate the need to do human clinical trials? We got 3 no's and a yes. Jason, where is it going to eliminate clinical trials? What do you think?
I'll plug Dexcom here a little bit. So at ATTD, the conference in Berlin this last week, we announced some in silico data off of a closed loop insulin pump, new algorithm, where we've used kind of generational data collected in clinical trials to validate in a large in silico model, and then was verified with a follow-up human trial of only 15 patients that's going to get submitted to the regulatory agency. So I think you can use the data in ways that will drastically limit the number of validation points you're going to need to make.
I like that. All right, and coming back to Joe's statement before about the product we receive here in the United States and in terms of our healthcare. Again, any healthcare professionals in the audience, just want to check. All right, I don't want to offend anybody in the room, but do we think that in, let's say, I'll give it 10 years, will the U.S. go from 46 on the list to the top 10 in terms of providing health care? Nobody said yes. Well, we got a lot of work to do, guys, and that's the fact. But listen, I really enjoyed it. Audience, thumbs up or thumbs down. Did you guys like the rapid fire panel? Thumbs up. All right. Thank you very much, panelists. Terrific job. All of these panels will be around if you want to ask them any questions rapidly. At the end of this, they'll be out, I think, and available for your help. But thank you very much, guys. Terrific panel. Thank you.